Blood splattered across the dry, cracked earth as Mary Callahan pressed her torn petticoat against the wound on her leg, the sound of distant hoofbeats growing louder by the second. Wyoming Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman alone, especially one running from a past as dark as hers. The sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless sky, baking the prairie to a golden crisp. Mary had been walking for nearly 2 days since fleeing the stagecoach robbery that had left her fellow passengers dead. The bullet had only grazed her thigh, but infection was setting in, turning her skin an angry red and making each step more excruciating than the last. Her water canteen had run dry hours ago. Sweat soaked through her once fine blue dress, now torn and stained with dirt and blood. She'd lost her hat sometime during her desperate flight, and her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her face, sticking to her feverish skin. The hoofbeats grew louder. Mary dragged herself behind a cluster of sagebrush, her breathing shallow and quick. She had nothing to defend herself with, not even a small knife. If the approaching rider was one of Blackwell's gang returning to finish what they'd started, she was as good as dead. The sound of a horse snorting and the creak of leather announced the rider's arrival. Mary held her breath, pressing herself closer to the ground. "I can see your dress behind that brush, madam," a deep voice called out. "I mean you no harm." Mary remained silent, weighing her options. Running was impossible. Fighting was useless. The voice came again, closer this time. "You're bleeding. Let me help you." Slowly, painfully, Mary raised herself enough to peer over the scrubby brush. A tall man sat atop a magnificent chestnut horse. His face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw, darkened by several days' growth of beard. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, a cotton shirt beneath a leather vest, denim pants tucked into scuffed boots. Most importantly, his hands were visible and empty, resting loosely on the saddle horn. "Who are you?" Mary managed, her voice cracking from thirst. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Name's Elijah Harmon. I run cattle about 20 miles east of here." He took a step forward, then stopped when she flinched. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," Mary lied, attempting to stand and failing miserably as her injured leg buckled beneath her. Elijah moved forward quickly, catching her before she hit the ground. His hands were strong but gentle as he eased her back down. "That leg needs tending," he said, his eyes a startling shade of blue scanning her injury with concern. "You've come a long way on it by the looks of things." Mary tensed as he reached for his canteen, but relaxed slightly when he simply offered it to her. She drank gratefully, the lukewarm water feeling like heaven on her parched throat. "Thank you," she whispered, handing it back. Elijah nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "You can walk or ride, but I'm taking you home," he said firmly. "My place is the closest for miles. You need that wound cleaned properly, food, and rest." Mary stiffened. "I don't even know you." A small smile touched his lips. "No, you don't. But you know what's waiting for you if you stay out here alone with that injury." He gestured to the vast, empty landscape surrounding them. "Night's coming. So are the coyotes. And that leg is already showing signs of infection." She glanced down at her thigh, where angry red streaks were indeed beginning to radiate outward from the wound. Fever had made her lightheaded, and the world seemed to tilt slightly as she tried to focus. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "I'm not asking for payment." Elijah's voice was gruff but kind. "Just trying to be a decent human being." Mary studied him, searching for any sign of deception or ill intent. She found none, only steady patience and concern in those blue eyes. "All right," she conceded. "But I'll ride, if it's all the same to you." Elijah nodded and stood, extending his hand to help her up. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated only briefly. "Mary." Mary Callahan. Well, Miss Callahan, let's get you taken care of. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight when she winced in pain. My horse, Thunder, is gentle. He won't give you any trouble. With surprising strength, Elijah lifted her onto the saddle as if she weighed nothing. The movement sent a sharp bolt of pain through her leg, and Mary bit her lip to keep from crying out. Sorry about that, he murmured, adjusting the stirrups for her. We'll take it slow. Elijah took the reins and began leading the horse on foot. Mary clutched the saddle horn, fighting waves of dizziness. The gentle rhythm of the horse's gait lulled her into a half-conscious state, and she found herself drifting in and out of awareness as they traveled. The sun was setting when Elijah's voice pulled her back to full consciousness. We're here. Mary blinked, taking in the modest homestead before them. A sturdy log cabin stood in a clearing, smoke curling from its stone chimney. A barn and corral sat off to one side, and a small vegetable garden was visible near the cabin's door. It wasn't grand, but it was well-maintained and welcoming. It's not much, Elijah said, misreading her silence. But it's shelter. It's lovely, Mary replied honestly. He helped her down from the horse, and Mary found her legs wouldn't hold her at all now. Without comment, Elijah swept her into his arms and carried her toward the cabin. I can walk, she protested weakly. Not today, you can't, he replied, pushing the door open with his shoulder. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a cooking area occupied another, and a bed was tucked into the far corner. A table with 2 chairs sat in the center of the main room. Everything was neat and organized, surprising for a man living alone on the frontier. Elijah placed her gently on the bed. I need to tend to Thunder first, then I'll see to your wound. Will you be all right for a few minutes? Mary nodded, sinking gratefully into the soft mattress. I'll be fine. When Elijah returned, he carried a basin of water, clean cloths, and a small wooden box. I need to clean that wound, he explained, setting his supplies on a small table beside the bed. It's going to hurt. I'm familiar with pain, Mary said quietly. Something flickered in Elijah's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. He nodded and carefully began cutting away the blood-soaked fabric around her wound. Mary kept her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her face burning with embarrassment as he exposed her leg. No man had ever seen so much of her skin before. The bullet just grazed you, Elijah commented, gently cleaning the wound. You're lucky. Doesn't feel lucky, she hissed as he dabbed at the inflamed flesh. No, I suppose not. He opened the wooden box, revealing an assortment of medicines and bandages. This is going to sting considerably. Mary grabbed the edge of the bed frame as he applied a pungent liquid to the wound. The pain was searing, and she couldn't suppress a cry. I'm sorry, Elijah murmured, working quickly. Almost done. By the time he finished bandaging her leg, Mary was drenched in sweat, her knuckles white from gripping the bed frame. You need to rest now, he said, covering her with a light blanket. I'll make some broth. Mary wanted to protest, to insist she couldn't impose further, but exhaustion and pain overwhelmed her. Her eyelids grew heavy, and despite her determination to remain alert in this stranger's home, she slipped into a deep sleep. When she awoke, the cabin was dark except for the warm glow of the fireplace. Mary blinked, disoriented, before remembering where she was. A movement caught her attention. Elijah, sitting in a chair by the fire, reading by its light. How long have I slept? She asked, her voice rough. Elijah looked up, setting his book aside. About 6 hours. How do you feel? Mary took stock of her condition. The fever seemed to have broken, though her legs still throbbed painfully. Better, I think. Thank you. He nodded and stood, moving to the stove where a pot simmered. You should eat something. The broth is ready. Mary struggled to sit up, and Elijah was quickly at her side, helping her. Their faces came close as he adjusted the pillow behind her back, and Mary caught the scent of leather and pine. His hands were calloused but gentle, and something stirred inside her that had nothing to do with her injury. He brought her a bowl of broth, rich with vegetables and chunks of rabbit meat. The savory aroma made Mary's stomach growl embarrassingly loud. "When did you last eat?" Elijah asked, frowning. "I had some jerky yesterday morning," she admitted. He shook his head disapprovingly. "Eat slowly. Your stomach won't be used to food." Mary nodded and sipped the broth carefully. It was delicious, hearty, and flavorful. "This is wonderful," she said, surprised. A smile touched Elijah's lips. "A man living alone learns to cook or starves." "Have you always lived alone?" The question slipped out before Mary could stop it. Elijah's expression grew guarded. "For the past 5 years. Before that, I had a wife." He turned away, busying himself with the fire. "I'm sorry," Mary said softly, understanding the implication. Elijah nodded without turning. "Catherine died in childbirth. The baby, too." "That's terrible. It was a long time ago." His tone indicated the subject was closed. "What about you, Miss Callahan? What were you doing out there alone?" Now it was Mary's turn to grow guarded. "Traveling. The stagecoach was robbed. I managed to get away." Elijah studied her face, clearly sensing there was more to the story, but he didn't press. "The Blackwell gang has been hitting stages all through this territory. You're fortunate to be alive." Mary tensed at the name. Blackwell. Thomas Blackwell. Nasty piece of work. Used to be a hired gun for the railroads until he discovered robbing them was more profitable. Elijah's eyes narrowed. "You've heard of him?" "Everyone has," Mary said carefully. "He's becoming notorious." Elijah nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "Well, you're safe here for now. When you're recovered, I can take you to Pine Ridge. It's the nearest town, about a day's ride." Mary focused on her broth, avoiding his eyes. "Thank you. I appreciate all you've done." "It's nothing." Elijah took her empty bowl. "You should rest more. We can talk in the morning." As he turned to leave, Mary caught his wrist. "Where will you sleep?" Elijah glanced at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "I've got bedding in the barn. I'll be fine." "But this is your home, your bed, and you're my guest," he interrupted firmly. "An injured one at that. I won't hear any arguments." Mary released his wrist, suddenly aware of how forward her gesture had been. "Thank you, Mr. Harmon." "Elijah," he corrected with a small smile. "Get some sleep, Mary." As he left the cabin, Mary sank back against the pillows, conflicting emotions washing over her. Gratitude for his kindness, fear of what lay ahead, and beneath it all, a whisper of something else, something dangerous, attraction to this quiet, honorable man who had saved her life. A man who would surely hate her if he knew the truth about who she was running from, and why. Morning came with a chorus of birdsong and the smell of coffee. Mary opened her eyes to find sunlight streaming through the cabin's small windows. Her leg ached, but the fiery pain of the previous day had subsided to a dull throb. Elijah stood by the stove, his back to her as he prepared breakfast. He changed his clothes, a fresh shirt, deep blue, tucked into clean denims. His hair, dark brown with hints of copper, was damp, as if he'd recently bathed. Mary felt suddenly conscious of her own disheveled state, her torn dress, her tangled hair, the grime of days on the trail. She must look a fright. "Good morning," she ventured. Elijah turned, a smile warming his features. "Good morning. How's the leg?" "Better, I think. Less painful." He nodded, bringing her a cup of coffee. "That's good. The infection doesn't seem to be spreading. I checked while you were sleeping." Mary felt heat rise to her cheeks at the thought of him examining her while she slept, but she accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you. For everything." Elijah shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. I've got eggs and biscuits almost ready. You need to build your strength. As they ate breakfast, Mary found herself studying her rescuer. In the clear morning light, she could see him properly for the first time. His face was handsome in a rugged way, strong cheekbones, a straight nose that had been broken at least once, and those striking blue eyes under dark brows. A small scar bisected his left eyebrow, and another marked his jaw near his ear. He was perhaps in his early 30s, old enough to have weathered life's storms, but young enough that they hadn't broken him. "You're staring," Elijah commented without looking up from his plate. Mary flushed.
"I'm sorry."
"I was just thinking."
"About what?"
"About how strange life is. Yesterday, I thought I was going to die alone in the wilderness. Now I'm sitting in a warm cabin eating breakfast with a stranger who saved my life." Elijah's eyes met hers. Life has a way of surprising us. Not always pleasantly. There was a depth of understanding in his gaze that made Mary wonder what other hardships he had endured besides losing his wife. "I need to check on the cattle today," Elijah said, changing the subject. "Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" Mary nodded. "Of course. I don't want to disrupt your work." "You're not," he assured her. "But there are chores that can't wait, even for injured visitors." He stood, collecting their empty plates. "There's water for washing up if you'd like.
"And I put out one of my shirts for you."
It'll be big, but cleaner than what you're wearing." Mary felt tears spring to her eyes at this simple kindness. "Thank you." After Elijah left, Mary managed to hobble to the washing basin. The cool water felt wonderful on her face and neck. With considerable effort, she changed out of her ruined dress into Elijah's shirt, which hung to her knees like a nightgown. The fabric smelled faintly of pine and something uniquely masculine that she assumed was Elijah himself. She found a comb and worked patiently through the tangles in her hair until it fell in dark waves down her back. The simple acts of cleanliness restored some of her dignity, and Mary felt more human than she had in days. Exploring the cabin, she found a small bookshelf filled with an eclectic collection: Shakespeare, Thoreau, practical guides to ranching and medicine, and several novels. Mary selected one and settled back on the bed to read, determined to rest her leg as Elijah had instructed. She didn't realize she'd fallen asleep until the sound of the door opening woke her. Elijah entered, bringing with him the scent of open air and horses. "I'm sorry," Mary said, sitting up. "I didn't mean to sleep the day away." "Sleep is the best medicine," Elijah replied, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. His eyes lingered on her for a moment, her freshly washed face, her loose hair, his shirt draping her small frame. Something flickered in his expression before he turned away. "How's the leg?" "Stiff, but better. I managed to wash up." "I see that." He busied himself at the stove. "I brought back a rabbit for supper." Mary set her book aside. "Let me help. I can't just lie here while you do everything." Elijah looked about to protest, but then nodded. "All right. You can sit at the table and help with the vegetables if you're feeling up to it." With his assistance, Mary made her way to the table. The simple domestic activity of preparing a meal together felt strangely intimate. Their hands occasionally brushed as they worked, and Mary found herself increasingly aware of Elijah's presence, his steady movements, the occasional half-smile that softened his features, the way he accommodated her limitations without making her feel helpless. "Where are you from originally?" Elijah asked as they worked. Mary hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "Boston originally. My father was a merchant, a long way from Boston to Wyoming territory."
"Yes."
"After my parents died, there wasn't much left for me there." This much, at least, was true. "I'm sorry about your parents," Elijah said quietly. "It was years ago," Mary replied, echoing his earlier words. "Where are you from?" "Kentucky, born and raised. Came west after the war." "You fought?" Elijah nodded, his expression growing distant. For the Union. For long years. Mary understood his reticence. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its scars ran deep across the nation and in the hearts of those who had fought. "How did you end up here?" she asked, changing the subject. A small smile touched his lips. Wanted open space. Room to breathe. Worked as a cowhand for a few years, saved every penny. When this land opened for homesteading, I claimed it. He gestured to the cabin around them. Built this place with my own hands. Catherine and I were going to build a life here. It's a beautiful home, Mary said softly. She would be proud of what you've done with it. Elijah's eyes met hers, surprised and grateful. Thank you for saying that. As they ate supper, Mary found herself telling stories of her childhood in Boston, carefully edited to omit certain details. Elijah spoke of his cattle operation, his hopes to expand his herd, and his occasional trips to Pine Ridge for supplies and news of the world beyond his isolated homestead. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Mary asked as they finished their meal. Elijah considered the question. "Sometimes. But I've got my books, my work, the mountains for company." He looked at her directly. "What about you? Where were you headed when the stage was robbed?" Mary dropped her gaze to her plate.
West.
California, eventually. Running to something or away from something? The question was too perceptive. Mary stiffened. "Does it matter?" "It might," Elijah said quietly. "Especially if what you're running from could follow you here." A chill ran through Mary. "What makes you think something's following me?" "Experience." Elijah's blue eyes held hers steadily. "And the fact that you haven't asked me to take you to town or to the nearest law officer to report the robbery." Mary fell silent, unable to deny his logic, but unwilling to confirm his suspicions. Elijah sighed. "I'm not asking for your secrets, Mary. But if there's danger coming to my door, I'd like to be prepared for it." "I don't think I was followed," she said finally.
They.
"The robbers. They thought I was dead. I played dead after being shot, then crawled away when they were distracted." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Elijah studied her face for a long moment, then nodded, apparently accepting her explanation. "Well, you're safe here until you're healed enough to travel. That will be a few days at least." "I don't want to impose." "You're not," he interrupted firmly. "I could use the company, to be honest." The following days fell into a gentle rhythm. Mary's strength returned gradually, and with it, her ability to move around the cabin. She insisted on helping with chores she could manage, cooking, mending Elijah's clothes, tending the small vegetable garden. Elijah continued his ranch work, sometimes gone for hours, but always returning before sunset. Each evening, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly comfortable. Mary found herself looking forward to these quiet times, watching Elijah's normally serious face light up when something amused him, listening to his deep voice as he occasionally read aloud from one of his books. On the fourth night, a thunderstorm rolled across the plains. The wind howled around the cabin, rain lashing at the windows. Mary sat by the fire, sewing a tear in one of Elijah's shirts while he cleaned his rifle at the table. A particularly loud clap of thunder made Mary jump, pricking her finger with a needle. "Are you all right?" Elijah asked, looking up. "Yes," just startled. Mary sucked the drop of blood from her finger. "I've never liked storms." Elijah set his rifle aside and joined her by the fire, bringing a small tin of salve. "Here," he said, taking her hand and examining the tiny wound. "This will help." His touch was gentle as he applied a dab of the salve to her fingertip. Mary was acutely aware of how close he sat, their knees almost touching, his head bent over her hand. When he looked up, their faces were inches apart. For a breathless moment, neither moved. Mary could see flecks of darker blue in his irises, the slight stubble on his jaw, the small scar by his mouth that she hadn't noticed before. Another crash of thunder broke the spell. Elijah cleared his throat and released her hand, moving back to a more proper distance. "Thank you," Mary said, her voice barely audible over the storm. Elijah nodded, his expression unreadable. "You should get some rest. Your leg is healing well, but you still need sleep to fully recover." As Mary lay in bed that night, listening to the rain, she confronted the growing truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling for Elijah Harmon, his quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, the glimpses of humor beneath his serious exterior. It was foolish, dangerous even. She couldn't stay, and she couldn't tell him the truth about who she was or why she was running. When the stage had been robbed, Mary had recognized one of the bandits, immediately Thomas Blackwell himself, the man she had fled Boston to escape. The man who had murdered her fiancé when she refused Blackwell's advances. The man who had vowed to find her no matter where she ran. If he discovered she was alive, he would come for her. And anyone close to her would be in danger. Morning brought clear skies and a decision. Mary's leg was healing well enough for travel. She would ask Elijah to take her to Pine Ridge the next day, where she could catch the westbound stage. It was the only way to ensure his safety. Elijah seemed to sense her withdrawal at breakfast, watching her with concern. "Is something wrong? Is your leg paining you?" "No, it's much better," Mary assured him. "I was thinking, perhaps tomorrow you could take me to Pine Ridge? I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Something flickered in Elijah's eyes, disappointment, before his expression smoothed. "If that's what you want. The stage comes through on Tuesdays and Fridays. Tomorrow's Thursday, so you'd have to wait a day." "That's fine. I can find a room at the hotel." Elijah nodded slowly. "All right. We'll leave after breakfast tomorrow." The day passed with an undercurrent of tension. Mary found herself memorizing small details of the cabin, of Elijah's movements, storing them away like treasures. In the evening, she insisted on cooking a special meal to thank him for all he'd done, using the last of the rabbit meat to make a stew with herbs from his garden. They ate mostly in silence, the weight of her imminent departure hanging between them. After they finished, Elijah disappeared outside for a time. When he returned, he carried a small bundle. "I have something for you," he said, setting it on the table. "For your journey." Mary unwrapped the bundle to find a small revolver, clean and well-maintained. "Elijah." "It was Catherine's," he explained. "For protection when I was away from the ranch. You should have it. The trail west can be dangerous for a woman alone." Mary ran her fingers over the smooth wooden grip. "I can't take this. It belonged to your wife. She would want you to have it." Elijah's voice was gruff. "Do you know how to use it?" Mary hesitated, then nodded. Her father had insisted she learn, one of the few practical skills he deemed appropriate for a merchant's daughter.
"Yes."
"But are you sure?" "I'm sure." Elijah met her eyes. "Though I wish you weren't in such a hurry to leave." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Mary looked away first. "I have to," she said softly. "I can't stay." "Why?" Elijah moved closer, his voice gentle. "What are you running from, Mary? It doesn't matter." She wrapped the revolver back in its cloth. "Thank you for this. And for everything else." Elijah studied her face for a long moment, then nodded, accepting her evasion. "We should turn in early. It's a long ride to town." As Mary lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. She was making the right decision, she told herself. The only decision that would keep Elijah safe. Yet the thought of never seeing him again created a physical ache in her chest. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke with a start to the sound of hoofbeats approaching the cabin. The gray light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the windows. Elijah was already up, standing by the window with his rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he ordered quietly. Mary's heart pounded as she struggled into her clothes, her original dress, mended as best she could. "Who is it?" Can't tell yet. 3 riders. Elijah's voice was tense. Get behind the bed, away from the windows. Mary did as he instructed, her hands trembling. Could Blackwell have found her?
But how?
The riders stopped outside. A voice called out, "Hello, the house. Elijah Harmon, you in there?" Elijah's shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's Sheriff Miller from Pine Ridge," he told Mary. Then, louder, "I'm here, Sheriff. Give me a moment." He set his rifle aside and opened the door. Mary remained hidden, listening intently. "Morning, Harmon." The sheriff's voice carried clearly into the cabin. "Sorry to disturb you so early, but we're tracking the Blackwell gang. Hit another stage 2 days ago, killed the driver and a passenger. Trail leads this direction." Mary's blood ran cold. Blackwell was nearby. "Haven't seen any sign of them," Elijah replied. "But I'll keep my eyes open." "Appreciate it. We think they're heading for the mountains, hoping to lose us in the high country." "Smart move," Elijah commented. "Easy to disappear up there." "Too easy," the sheriff agreed grimly. "By the way, you haven't had any strangers pass through, have you? We found signs that someone else was at the robbery blood trail, leading away from the stage. Might be a wounded passenger, might be one of Blackwell's men." There was a pause, and Mary held her breath. "No strangers," Elijah said finally. "Just me and my cattle." "All right. If you see anything suspicious, fire 3 shots. We'll be patrolling the area for a few days." "Will do, Sheriff." The sound of the riders departing reached Mary's ears, and moments later, Elijah re-entered the cabin. His expression was thunderous as he turned to face her. "You want to tell me what that was about?" he demanded. "Why I just lied to the sheriff." Mary rose shakily from her hiding place.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't ask you to lie." "You didn't have to." Elijah's blue eyes were hard as flint. "But I knew if I told him about you, you'd run. And with Blackwell's gang in the area, that would be suicide." He stepped closer. "Why is Blackwell after you specifically, Mary? And don't tell me you were just an unlucky passenger on that stage." Mary sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of her secrets suddenly too heavy to bear. "He killed my fiancé," she whispered. Elijah went still. "What?" "In Boston. 6 months ago." Mary's voice strengthened as she finally spoke the truth. "Thomas Blackwell was a business associate of my father's. After my parents died, he
Pursued me.
When I refused him and became engaged to another man, Blackwell murdered him. Made it look like a robbery." Elijah moved to sit beside her, his anger giving way to concern. "Go on." "I knew it was him. I even went to the police, but Blackwell had alibis, powerful friends. No one would listen." Mary twisted her hands in her lap. "Then I started receiving threats. Messages saying I would be next.
So I ran.
Changed my name. My real name is Margaret Callahan. Mary was my mother's name. Traveled west, thinking I could disappear. But he found you." Mary nodded. "Somehow, he discovered which stage I was on. When the robbery happened, I recognized him immediately. He recognized me too. I was shot in the confusion, fell from the stage. He must have thought I was dead, or they would have searched for me. And now he's in the area again." Elijah's voice was grim.
Yes.
"Which is why I have to leave," Mary insisted. "If he finds out I'm alive and that you helped me, he'll kill you too." Elijah stood abruptly, pacing the small cabin. "You can't leave now. Not with Blackwell's gang between here and town. I can't stay and put you in danger. And I can't let you ride into an ambush." Elijah's voice rose with frustration. He took a deep breath, visibly calming himself. "Listen to me, Mary Margaret, whoever you are. The sheriff and his men are searching for Blackwell. Our best move is to stay here, keep out of sight, and let them do their job." Mary wanted to argue, but the logic of his words was undeniable. "For how long?" "A few days. Maybe a week." Elijah's expression softened. I know you're scared. But I promise you, you're safer here with me than anywhere else right now. The conviction in his voice was compelling. Mary found herself nodding slowly. All right. A few days. Elijah relaxed slightly.
Good.
Now let's have breakfast and figure out our next steps. As they ate, Elijah outlined his plan. They would maintain their normal routine to avoid arousing suspicion if anyone was watching the cabin. Mary would stay inside as much as possible. Elijah would take extra precautions when working with the cattle, carrying his rifle and keeping a sharp lookout for strangers. What if Blackwell evades the sheriff? Mary asked. Elijah's expression hardened. Then I'll deal with him myself. You don't know what he's capable of. I fought in the war, Mary. Elijah interrupted quietly. I've seen what men are capable of, and I've dealt with men like Blackwell before. Something in his tone made Mary believe him, though it also raised new questions about his past. Before she could ask, Elijah stood. I need to check the cattle. Stay inside, keep the door locked, and keep Catherine's revolver close. He hesitated, then added, I'll be back before noon. After he left, Mary moved restlessly around the cabin. The tension of waiting was almost worse than facing danger directly. To distract herself, she began a thorough cleaning of the cabin, scrubbing floors, washing linens, organizing Elijah's meager collection of dishes and cooking utensils. When Elijah returned, he looked surprised at the transformation. You didn't have to do all this. I needed something to do, Mary explained. Idle hands and all that. A smile touched his lips. Well, thank you. Place hasn't been this clean since. He trailed off. Since Catherine, Mary finished softly. Elijah nodded, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Yes. Mary hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Will you tell me about her? If it's not too painful. Elijah was quiet for so long that Mary thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to a small trunk in the corner of the room, opened it, and withdrew a daguerreotype in a simple frame. He handed it to Mary. The image showed a young woman with a sweet face, her hair arranged in the style of a decade ago, her eyes bright even in the monochrome picture. She was kind, Elijah said simply. Saw the good in everyone. Even me, when I came back from the war bitter and broken. How did you meet? Mary asked, carefully holding the precious image. Her father was my commanding officer. After the war, when I couldn't settle back into civilian life in Kentucky, he offered me work on his ranch in Missouri. Elijah's voice softened with memory. Catherine taught me to laugh again. To hope. When we married, her father gave us his blessing and enough money to start our own place out west. Mary handed the picture back. She sounds wonderful. She was. Elijah returned the daguerreotype to the trunk. For a long time after she died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd never feel. He looked at Mary, his eyes intense. Never feel anything like that again. Mary's heart quickened at his words, at the implication in his gaze. Elijah. A sound outside interrupted the moment, a horse whinnying, not Elijah's own mount. In an instant, Elijah's expression changed, alert and wary. He moved silently to the window, peering out cautiously. Someone's coming, he whispered. Single rider. Stay back. Mary retreated to the shadows as Elijah retrieved his rifle. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped outside the cabin. Hello, a voice called. Anyone home? Elijah exchanged a glance with Mary. Stay hidden, he mouthed, then moved to the door, keeping his rifle ready, but not obviously threatening. He opened the door partway. Can I help you? Hope so, the voice replied. Name's Wilson. Got separated from my hunting party. Been riding in circles for hours, I reckon. Could use some water for my horse and directions back to Pine Ridge. Of course, Elijah said, his voice casual. Watering trough is by the barn. Help yourself. Mary held her breath as Elijah stepped outside, leaving the door slightly ajar. She could hear the murmur of conversation as Elijah apparently gave the stranger directions. Then the tone changed. "Say, you living out here all alone?" the stranger asked. "Just me and the cattle," Elijah replied evenly. "Funny thing," the man continued. "We've been tracking someone. A woman. Trail led this direction before we lost it." Mary's blood ran cold. This was no lost hunter. "Haven't seen any women," Elijah said. "Not much call for them out this way." "Mind if I have a look in your cabin?" The man's voice hardened. "Just to be sure." "I mind," Elijah replied, his tone equally hard. "You've got your water and your directions. Best be on your way." There was a tense silence, then the sound of a gun being cocked. "I don't think so, friend. See, the boss is mighty interested in finding this particular lady. Says she's got something that belongs to him." Mary's hand closed around Catherine's revolver, which she'd kept in her pocket as Elijah instructed. Moving silently to the window, she peered out through a small gap in the curtains. Elijah stood facing a wiry man with a scraggly beard who had a pistol pointed at Elijah's chest. Elijah's rifle was still in his hands, but lowered. "Don't want trouble," Elijah was saying calmly. "But you're trespassing on my land now." The man sneered. "Trouble found you the moment you decided to hide Blackwell's woman." "I'm not hiding anyone," Elijah insisted. "And I don't know any Blackwell." The man spat on the ground. "Lying won't help you, mister. Last chance. Where's the woman?" Mary saw Elijah's shoulders tense, saw his fingers adjust slightly on his rifle. He was going to try something, and this man would shoot him. Before she could think twice, Mary flung open the door, Catherine's revolver steady in her hands. "I'm right here," she called clearly. Both men turned, startled. The stranger's momentary distraction was all Elijah needed. In one fluid motion, he swung his rifle up and cracked it against the man's wrist. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the ground as it fell from the man's grasp. Elijah followed with a swift blow to the man's jaw that sent him sprawling in the dirt. "Mary, get back inside," Elijah shouted, but it was too late. The sound of more hoofbeats approached rapidly from the direction of the trees. 2 more riders appeared, guns drawn. "Run!" Elijah yelled, firing his rifle at the approaching men. One fell from his horse with a cry. Mary didn't run. Instead, she took careful aim with Catherine's revolver and fired at the second rider. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to make the man veer off, seeking cover behind the barn. The first man was struggling to his feet, reaching for his fallen pistol. Elijah kicked it away and delivered another blow with the butt of his rifle that left the man unconscious. "Inside now," Elijah ordered, grabbing Mary's arm and pulling her toward the cabin as a bullet splintered the doorframe beside them. Once inside, Elijah barred the door and moved quickly to the window, rifle ready. "Stay low," he instructed Mary. "That shot of mine will have alerted the sheriff if he's anywhere nearby. We just need to hold out until help arrives." Mary's heart pounded as she crouched beside him. "I'm sorry. I couldn't let him shoot you." Elijah's eyes met hers briefly. "We'll talk about your recklessness later. If we survive." A voice called from outside. "Harmon, send the woman out, and you can live." "Go to hell," Elijah shouted back. A barrage of gunfire answered him, bullets thudding into the sturdy logs of the cabin walls. Elijah returned fire carefully, conserving ammunition. "How many bullets do you have?" Mary asked, checking Catherine's revolver. She had 5 shots remaining. "Not enough," Elijah admitted grimly. "Maybe 20 for the rifle, another 6 in my sidearm." Outside, the attackers had fallen silent. The stillness was somehow more terrifying than the gunfire had been. "What are they doing?" Mary whispered. Elijah's expression was tense. "Nothing good."
"Stay here."
"I need to check the back window." As he moved across the cabin, a crash of breaking glass came from that direction, followed by a ball of flames sailing through the now broken window. The kerosene lamp it had been fashioned from shattered on the floor, spreading fire rapidly across the wooden planks. "They're trying to smoke us out," Elijah growled, grabbing a blanket to beat at the flames. Mary joined him, using a rug to smother part of the fire. Between them, they managed to extinguish the immediate danger, but smoke filled the cabin, making them cough. "We can't stay here," Elijah decided. "They'll just throw in more fire. But if we go outside, we have a chance. In here, we'll either burn or suffocate." Elijah moved to the front window, peering out cautiously. "There's one by the barn, one using the water trough for cover. The third is down. If we go out the back, we might make it to the trees." Mary nodded, gripping Catherine's revolver tightly. "I'm ready." Elijah caught her arm. "Mary, if something happens to me, don't stop running. Head west into the mountains. There's a line shack about 5 miles in, marked on the map in my trunk. You can hide there until it's safe." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Mary insisted, refusing to contemplate the alternative. Elijah's eyes held hers intently. "Just promise me." "I promise," she whispered. Elijah nodded once, then moved to the back door. "Stay close. On my signal, run for the trees. Don't look back, don't stop." Mary's heart pounded as Elijah eased the door open, checking for any sign of the attackers. The way appeared clear a stretch of open ground, then the safety of the forest about 50 yards away.
"Now,"
Elijah commanded, and they burst from the cabin, running hard. They were halfway to the trees when a shout went up. Gunfire erupted behind them. Mary felt something tug at her sleeve, but kept running, her eyes fixed on the tree line ahead. They reached the shelter of the forest, Elijah pulling her behind a large pine as bullets thudded into the trunk. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her frantically. "No, just grazed my sleeve." Mary was breathing hard, adrenaline making her voice shake.
I've fine.
Come on, we need to keep moving." They pushed deeper into the forest, Elijah setting a punishing pace despite the uneven terrain. Mary's leg ached, the healing wound protesting this abuse, but she gritted her teeth and kept up. Behind them, they could hear their pursuers crashing through the underbrush. The men were gaining. "There," Elijah pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "We can make a stand there." They scrambled up the rocks, finding a defensible position with good visibility of the surrounding forest. Elijah positioned Mary behind the largest boulder and took up a stance where he could cover the most likely approach. "Save your ammunition," he instructed. "Don't fire unless you have a clear shot." Mary nodded, trying to control her ragged breathing and shaking hands. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, then stopped. The forest fell silent except for the occasional call of a bird. "They're being more cautious now," Elijah murmured. "Probably spreading out to surround us." Mary's throat was dry with fear. How long until the sheriff might come?
"Hard to say."
If he heard the shots. Elijah's voice trailed off as a twig snapped nearby. A figure darted between trees below them. Elijah's rifle cracked, and the man fell with a cry. Immediately, gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around them as Mary and Elijah pressed themselves into whatever cover they could find. 2 more, at least, Elijah called over the gunfire. Maybe 3. A bullet grazed Elijah's arm, tearing his shirt and drawing a line of blood. He barely flinched, returning fire steadily. Mary spotted movement to their left, a man attempting to climb the rocks from the side. She took careful aim with Catherine's revolver and fired. The man clutched his shoulder and fell back, but not before getting off a shot that struck the rock inches from Mary's head, sending stone fragments flying. A sharp sting on her cheek told her one had cut her, but there was no time to worry about it. More gunfire was coming from below, pinning them down. "We're running out of time and ammunition," Elijah said grimly, checking his rifle. 4 shots left. Mary had 3 bullets remaining in the revolver. 7 shots between them, and at least 2 attackers still active. Maybe we could try to break through, make a run for it again, she suggested. Elijah shook his head. They'd cut us down in the open. Then what? A new sound interrupted her. More hoofbeats, many of them, approaching rapidly from the direction of the cabin. Get down! Elijah called Mary flat against the rocks as a fresh volley of gunfire erupted below. But this time, the shots weren't directed at them. Blackwell. This is Sheriff Miller. Throw down your weapons. Relief washed over Mary like a physical wave. The sheriff, she breathed. Elijah's tense expression eased slightly. Just in time. More gunfire was exchanged below, then silence. After a moment, the sheriff's voice called up to them. Harmon, you up there? Here, Sheriff. Elijah called back. With a lady. All clear down here. You can come on down. Elijah helped Mary to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm. Are you all right? She nodded, suddenly aware of how close they had come to death. Thanks to you. His blue eyes searched her face. You saved me first, remember? Though that was a damn fool thing to do, coming out of the cabin like that. A small smile touched Mary's lips. I couldn't let them shoot you. Elijah's expression softened. Come on. Let's see what the sheriff has to say. They made their way carefully down the rocky slope to find Sheriff Miller and 4 deputies securing 2 prisoners. 3 bodies lay covered on the ground nearby. Quite a situation you've got here, Harmon, the sheriff said, his bushy eyebrows raised. And who might this lady be? Before Elijah could answer, Mary stepped forward. My name is Margaret Callahan, Sheriff. These men work for Thomas Blackwell. He's been pursuing me since Boston, where he murdered my fiancée 6 months ago. The sheriff's eyebrows climbed higher. That's quite a story, Miss Callahan. It's the truth, Elijah confirmed. Blackwell's gang attacked my home, trying to get to her. And where is Blackwell himself? The sheriff asked, looking at the prisoners. One of the captured men, the wiry one who had first approached the cabin, spat on the ground. You'll never catch him. He's long gone by now. The sheriff stepped closer to the man. Where was he headed? The man just smirked, saying nothing. He mentioned a boss earlier, Elijah told the sheriff. Said Blackwell was mighty interested in finding Mary, Miss Callahan. The sheriff turned to Mary. Any idea why he's so fixated on you, madam? Mary hesitated, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. From it, she took a folded piece of paper. This is why. It's a letter Blackwell wrote to his associate in Boston, detailing his plan to murder my fiancée. I found it in my father's desk after his death. Blackwell must have given it to my father to keep safe, never expecting me to find it. The sheriff took the letter, reading it carefully. His expression grew grim. This is evidence of premeditated murder, all right, and explains why he's so desperate to find you. He refolded the paper. I'll need to take this and your statement, Miss Callahan. We've been after Blackwell for months for the stage robberies, but murder will hang him for certain. Of course, Mary agreed. Whatever you need. The sheriff turned to his deputies. Get these prisoners secured. We'll take them back to Pine Ridge. To Elijah and Mary, he added. You two should come along as well. Your cabin isn't safe right now, Harmon, and Miss Callahan needs protection until we catch Blackwell. Elijah nodded. We'll gather what we can salvage and follow you to town. As the sheriff and his men prepared to depart with their prisoners, Elijah and Mary returned to the cabin. The structure was still standing, though smoke damage was visible and the back window was broken. Inside, the floor was scorched where the fire had been, but the damage was contained. It could have been worse, Elijah observed, gathering essential items into a saddlebag. Mary moved to help him, her emotions a confused tangle. Relief at their survival, fear that Blackwell was still at large, and beneath it all, a growing certainty that leaving Elijah would be harder than she had ever imagined. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly as they worked. "After we reach Pine Ridge?" Elijah paused, looking at her directly. "That depends." "On what?" "On you." His voice was soft but steady. "On whether you still plan to head west alone." Mary's heart quickened. "What are you saying, Elijah?" He set down the saddlebag and moved closer to her. "I'm saying that in the past week, something has changed for me. Something I didn't think was possible anymore." His blue eyes held hers intently. "I care for you, Mary Margaret. More than I should, perhaps, given how little time we've known each other." "Elijah." Mary's voice caught. "You don't have to say anything now," he continued quickly. "I know you've been through hell. I know Blackwell is still out there. But when this is over, when you're safe, I want you to consider staying here with me." Mary found herself unable to speak, overwhelmed by his words and by her own feelings. Elijah's expression grew uncertain at her silence. "Unless I've misread everything, and you don't," she stopped his words with her fingers against his lips. "You haven't misread anything," she whispered. "I care for you too. More than I thought possible." Relief and joy transformed Elijah's face. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. His lips were gentle at first, then more insistent as Mary responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "We should go," he murmured reluctantly. "The sheriff's waiting." Mary nodded, though she made no move to step away. "Will you rebuild the cabin?" A smile touched Elijah's lips. "We will. Together. If that's what you want." "It is," Mary said softly. "More than anything." Pine Ridge was a typical frontier town, one main street lined with wooden buildings, a few side streets with smaller structures, and an assortment of residents going about their business with the unhurried pace of rural life. The sheriff's office and jail occupied a solid building near the center of town, across from the two-story hotel where Mary would be staying. Word of the shootout at Elijah's ranch spread quickly, and curious townspeople gathered as Sheriff Miller escorted his prisoners to the jail. Mary found herself the object of many stares as she and Elijah made their way to the hotel. "Don't mind them," Elijah murmured. "News is scarce out here. They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough." The hotel proprietor, Mrs. Winters, was a plump, motherly woman who clucked sympathetically when told the bare outlines of Mary's situation. "You poor dear," she said, showing Mary to a clean, simply furnished room. "You'll be safe here. Sheriff Miller runs a tight town. No ruffians like this Blackwell character will trouble you under his watch." "Thank you," Mary said, setting down the small bundle of possessions she had salvaged from the cabin. Most of her original belongings had been lost in the stagecoach robbery. "Mr. Harmon, I've put you in the room next door," Mrs. Winters continued. "Dinner is served at 6 in the dining room downstairs." After she left, Elijah lingered in the doorway of Mary's room. "Will you be all right? I need to speak with the blacksmith about some supplies for repairing the cabin." Mary nodded. "I'll be fine. I should rest before giving my statement to the sheriff later." Elijah seemed reluctant to leave. "Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone but me or the sheriff." "I will," Mary promised, touched by his concern. Left alone, Mary sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The events of the day played through her mind like scenes from a dime novel: the attack on the cabin, their desperate flight through the forest, the shootout at the rocks, and finally, Elijah's declaration and that kiss that still made her heart race to remember. She must have dozed off, because a knock at the door startled her awake. The light outside had changed, indicating several hours had passed. "Who is it?" she called, remembering Elijah's warning. "It's me," came his familiar voice. Mary unlocked the door to find Elijah standing there, freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes likely purchased in town, as his own had been smoke-damaged. "You look better," she commented with a small smile. "Feel better too. The blacksmith is lending me a wagon tomorrow to haul supplies back to the ranch." Elijah's eyes searched her face. "How are you holding up?" "I'm all right. Just tired." She stepped back to let him enter the room. "Did you learn anything new about Blackwell?" Elijah's expression darkened. The sheriff interrogated the prisoners. "They claim Blackwell was heading for the Montana Territory, but Miller thinks they're lying to throw us off the trail. Do you think he's still nearby?" Mary couldn't keep the fear from her voice. "It's possible, but the sheriff has men watching all the roads out of the area." Elijah took her hand, his touch reassuring. "You're safe here, Mary. I promise." Mary squeezed his hand gratefully. "Sheriff Miller sent word that he wants to take my statement after dinner." "I'll come with you," Elijah said immediately. They went down to dinner together, aware of the curious glances from other diners. Mrs. Winters had prepared a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, a welcome change from the simple fare they'd had at the cabin. "This is delicious," Mary commented, realizing how hungry she was. "Almost makes getting shot at worthwhile," Elijah replied with a hint of humor. Mary looked up to find him watching her with a softness in his eyes that made her heart skip. "Almost," she agreed with a smile. After dinner, they walked to the sheriff's office, Elijah's hand protectively at the small of her back. The evening air was cool, the western sky painted in spectacular shades of orange and purple as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Sheriff Miller was waiting for them, his desk piled with papers. "Miss Callahan, Mr. Harmon. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Mary spent the next hour recounting her history with Thomas Blackwell, his association with her father, his unwanted advances after her parents' deaths, her engagement to David Porter, and Blackwell's subsequent murder of David when Mary refused to break the engagement. "I had no proof," she explained. "Only my suspicions. Then, while going through my father's papers, I found the letter. Blackwell must have given it to my father for safekeeping, never expecting me to find it." "And that's when the threat started?" the sheriff asked. Mary nodded. "Notes left at my door. Warnings that I would join David if I didn't keep quiet. When I tried to go to the Boston police again, someone followed me home and tried to break into my house that night. I fled the next day, heading west under my mother's name." The sheriff made notes as she spoke. "And the stagecoach robbery, you're certain Blackwell was there personally?" "Absolutely. I recognized his voice and his build, though he wore a mask. And he recognized me. I heard him say my name, my real name, Margaret, before I was shot in the confusion." Elijah, who had remained silent during her testimony, reached over and took her hand, offering silent support. The sheriff noticed the gesture, but made no comment. "This letter is damning evidence," he said, tapping the paper on his desk. "With this and your testimony, we can hang Blackwell when we catch him." "When?" Mary asked, focusing on his choice of word. Sheriff Miller's expression was determined. "When, not if. He's made a mistake coming into my territory. Between my men and the federal marshals I've telegraphed, Blackwell's days are numbered." "What about Mary's safety in the meantime?" Elijah asked. "I'll have a deputy keeping watch on the hotel," the sheriff assured them. "And I've alerted all my men to be on the lookout for anyone matching Blackwell's description." He turned to Mary. "I would advise against traveling until we've apprehended him, Miss Callahan." "I understand," Mary replied. "I have no plans to leave Pine Ridge at present." Something in her tone made Elijah glance at her, a question in his eyes. Mary gave him a small smile in return. As they walked back to the hotel, the streets of Pine Ridge were quiet, most businesses closed for the night. A deputy tipped his hat to them as they passed, evidently one of those assigned to watch the hotel. "You told the sheriff you have no plans to leave," Elijah said carefully. "Did you mean that?" Mary stopped walking, turning to face him in the moonlight. "I meant it.
If.
If your offer still stands. Elijah's face softened. It stands. It will always stand. He took both her hands in his. Mary, I know this is fast. I know we've known each other only a short time. But sometimes life doesn't give us the luxury of moving slowly. No, Mary agreed softly. Sometimes it doesn't. I lost someone I loved once. Elijah continued, his voice low and intense. I never thought I would feel this way again. Never wanted to risk it. But then you limped into my life, stubborn and brave and beautiful, and everything changed. Mary felt tears prick her eyes at his words. Elijah. I'm not asking for promises right now, he said quickly. Just a chance. A chance to rebuild our cabin if you want it to be. A chance to see if what we feel for each other can grow into something lasting. Mary reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I want that chance, she whispered. More than anything. Elijah's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. In the middle of Pine Ridge's deserted Main Street, under the vast canopy of stars, he kissed her again, a kiss of promise, of possibility, of hope. The next few days fell into a pattern. Elijah worked during the daylight hours, transporting supplies to his ranch and beginning repairs on the cabin. Mary remained in town, helping Mrs. Winters at the hotel to earn her keep and giving her time to think about the rapid changes in her life. Each evening, Elijah would return, and they would have dinner together, talking late into the night, learning each other's stories, dreams, and fears. Mary told him about her childhood in Boston, her parents, her brief engagement to David. Elijah shared more about his experiences in the war, his life with Catherine, his hopes for the future of his ranch. With each conversation, each shared laugh, each moment of comfortable silence, the connection between them deepened. What had begun as attraction and gratitude was transforming into something more profound, more enduring. On the fourth day, Sheriff Miller brought news. One of Blackwell's men was captured trying to cross into Colorado territory, he told them. He confirmed that Blackwell is heading north to Montana, just as the others claimed. Do you believe it this time? Elijah asked skeptically. The sheriff nodded. This man was trying to get away from Blackwell, not protect him. Says Blackwell has become obsessed with finding you, Miss Callahan. Dangerously so. The man feared Blackwell would get them all killed or captured, so he struck out on his own. Mary felt a chill at his words. So Blackwell is still out there, still looking for me. Yes, but heading in the wrong direction, the sheriff said reassuringly. The federal marshals have been alerted. They'll track him down. Elijah's expression remained concerned. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I believe Miss Callahan is safe here in Pine Ridge. But I'd recommend continued caution. No traveling alone, staying within the town limits. After the sheriff left, Mary turned to Elijah. What do you think? Do you believe Blackwell is heading north? Elijah considered the question carefully. I think it's possible, but I also think we should remain vigilant. He took her hand. The cabin repairs are nearly complete. Once they're done, I'd like you to come see it. See if you could imagine making a life there. Mary's heart warmed at his words. I'd like that. 2 days later, Elijah declared the cabin ready for inspection. They rode out together in the morning, a deputy accompanying them as a precaution. The journey was peaceful, the late summer landscape beautiful under the clear blue sky. As they crested the final rise and the cabin came into view, Mary felt a surge of emotion. It looked different now, the broken window replaced, the exterior logs scrubbed clean of smoke stains, a new porch added across the front. Yet it was still unmistakably the place where she had begun to heal, where she had started to trust again, where she had first felt the stirrings of love for the quiet, honorable man beside her. What do you think? Elijah asked, watching her face anxiously. It's beautiful, Mary replied truthfully. You've done so much work. Come inside, he urged, helping her down from her horse. The interior had been transformed as well. The scorched floorboards had been replaced, the walls scrubbed clean. New curtains hung at the windows, a feminine touch that Mary hadn't expected. Mrs. Winters helped with those, Elijah explained, following her gaze. Said no home is complete without proper curtains. Mary smiled, deeply touched by the effort he had made. She's right. Elijah showed her the other improvements: a larger cooking area, additional shelves for storage, a second chair at the table that matched the first. Small changes that spoke volumes about his hopes for their future. There's one more thing, he said, leading her to the corner where the bed stood. Beside it now was a small table with a vase of wildflowers. And on the wall above hung a simple wooden frame containing pressed flowers, prairie roses, their delicate pink petals preserved between glass. Catherine taught me how to press flowers, Elijah explained softly. It was something she loved to do. I thought you might like to have something beautiful to look at here. Something that represents new beginnings. Mary felt tears well in her eyes. That he would share this connection to Catherine, transform it into a gift for their potential future together, moved her deeply. It's perfect, she whispered, turning to face him. Everything is perfect. Elijah's blue eyes searched her face. Does that mean? It means yes, Mary said, her heart full. Yes, I want to make a life here. With you. Joy transformed Elijah's features. He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. Mary laughed, a sound of pure happiness that echoed in the cabin that would soon be their home. The deputy, who had tactfully remained outside, called to them. Mr. Harmon? We should start back soon if we want to reach town before dark. Reality intruded on their moment of joy. Mary's smile faded slightly.
He's right.
We should go. Elijah nodded, though reluctance was clear in his expression. Soon, he promised, taking her hands in his. Soon we won't have to leave. This will be our home, together. Together, Mary echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The ride back to Pine Ridge was filled with plans and possibilities. Mary would need to obtain her few belongings from Boston, which could be arranged through the proper channels once Blackwell was captured. Elijah spoke of expanding the cattle herd, perhaps adding sheep as well. They discussed garden plans, additional furniture they might need, how they would spend the long winter evenings. They were so engrossed in their conversation that at first, they didn't notice the plume of smoke rising from the direction of Pine Ridge. It was the deputy who spotted it first. Something's wrong, he said, urging his horse to a faster pace. That's coming from town. As they rode closer, the smoke became more visible, black and thick, rising from somewhere near the center of Pine Ridge. The sound of shouting reached them as they approached the outskirts of town. What they found was chaos. The hotel was ablaze, flames leaping from its windows as townspeople formed a bucket brigade to fight the fire. Other buildings on the street showed signs of damage, broken windows, splintered doors. Sheriff Miller spotted them as they rode in and hurried over, his face grim beneath the soot that streaked it. What happened? Elijah demanded, dismounting quickly. Blackwell, the sheriff replied tersely. He came with 6 men about an hour ago. Straight to the hotel, looking for Miss Callahan. Mary felt the blood drain from her face. He wasn't heading north. No, madame. It was a ruse. The sheriff's expression was apologetic. When Mrs. Winters told him you weren't there, that you'd gone out to Harmon's ranch. Well, he didn't take it well. Is anyone hurt? Elijah asked, his arm going protectively around Mary's shoulders. Mrs. Winters is banged up pretty bad. Doc's with her now. 2 others with minor injuries from flying glass when they shot up the saloon. The sheriff ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We drove them off, but not before they set fire to the hotel. Where did they go? Mary asked, dreading the answer. Sheriff Miller met her eyes directly. Headed east. Toward your ranch, Harmon. Elijah's arm tightened around Mary. They just missed us on the trail. Lucky for you they did, the sheriff said grimly. Blackwell was in a killing mood, kept shouting that the woman was his, that no one would take what belonged to him. Mary shuddered, remembering the possessive rage in Blackwell's eyes the last time she had seen him in Boston. This is my fault, she whispered. All of this. No, Elijah said firmly. This is Blackwell's doing, not yours. You're his victim, not his accomplice. Sheriff Miller nodded in agreement. Harmon's right. And now we've got a chance to end this. My deputy spotted them heading toward the eastern ridge. They're probably making camp for the night before doubling back to check the ranch again tomorrow. You're going after them, Elijah stated, already understanding the sheriff's plan. Tonight. With every man I can muster. Sheriff Miller's expression was determined. Will you join us, Harmon? You know that terrain better than most. Elijah glanced at Mary, conflict clear in his eyes. I don't want to leave you. I'll be safe here, Mary assured him, though the thought of him riding into danger made her heart constrict. The town needs every man who can help. She'll stay at Doc Miller's house with Mrs. Winters and the other women, the sheriff added. My youngest deputy will remain behind to guard them. After a moment's hesitation, Elijah nodded. I'll come, but I need a few minutes with Mary first. The sheriff understood. Of course. We ride in 30 minutes. Meet at the livery stable. When they were alone, Elijah led Mary away from the commotion to a quiet spot behind the damaged sheriff's office. His face was grave as he took both her hands in his. I don't like leaving you, he said softly. I don't like it either, Mary admitted. But I understand why you must go. This has to end, Elijah. Blackwell has to be stopped before he hurts anyone else. Elijah nodded, his blue eyes intent on her face, as if memorizing every detail. Mary, before I go, there's something I need to say. Mary's heart quickened at his serious tone. What is it? I love you. The words were simple, direct, filled with emotion. I know it soon. I know we've known each other only a short time, but if anything happens tonight, I couldn't bear for you not to know. Tears filled Mary's eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that first day, when you found me half dead in the sagebrush and said you were taking me home. A smile touched Elijah's lips at the memory. You were so stubborn, insisted you could walk. I didn't know then that I was walking toward everything I ever wanted, Mary replied softly. Elijah drew her into his arms, holding her tightly. When this is over, he murmured against her hair, when Blackwell is dealt with and you're truly safe. Will you marry me, Mary Callahan? Mary drew back just enough to see his face, her heart overflowing with joy despite the danger surrounding them. Yes, she said simply. With all my heart, yes. Their kiss was both tender and desperate, a pledge of love, a promise of return, a defiance of the darkness that threatened their future. All too soon, they heard the sheriff calling for the men to gather. Elijah reluctantly released her, though he kept hold of her hand. I'll come back to you, he vowed. Wait for me. Always, Mary promised. She watched him walk away, her heart both heavy with fear and buoyant with love. Whatever happened tonight would determine their future, whether they would have the chance to build the life they had begun to plan, or whether Blackwell's obsession would destroy everything. Mary was escorted to Dr. Miller's house, where Mrs. Winters lay resting, her face bruised but her spirit unbroken. There you are, dear, the older woman said when Mary entered. I was so worried when that monster came looking for you. Mary sat beside her bed, taking her hand. I'm so sorry you were hurt because of me. Mrs. Winters shook her head firmly. Nonsense. That man is responsible for his own evil actions. No one else. She patted Mary's hand. Now, while we wait for our men to return victorious, why don't you tell me about your plans with Mr. Harmon? I saw the way he looks at you. like you hung the moon and stars." Despite her anxiety, Mary found herself smiling. "He asked me to marry him." Mrs. Winters beamed. "Wonderful. That man has been alone too long. And you, my dear, deserve happiness after all you've been through." The hours of waiting were interminable. Other women from the town joined them at the doctor's house, bringing food and offering support. They spoke of ordinary things, recipes, sewing patterns, local gossip, as if by focusing on the mundane they could keep at bay the knowledge that their husbands, brothers, and sons were riding into danger. Mary tried to join in, but her thoughts were with Elijah. Had they found Blackwell's camp? Was there a confrontation happening even now? Was Elijah safe? Midnight came and went. The women took turns napping, but Mary couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching the eastern horizon for any sign of the returning posse. It was nearly dawn when the sound of hoofbeats broke the pre-dawn silence. Mary's heart leapt as she peered through the curtains. Men on horseback were entering the town, moving slowly. In the dim light, she couldn't make out individuals. The young deputy stationed outside came to the door. "They're back, ladies," he announced. "Sheriff Miller sent word it's over. Blackwell is dead." A collective sigh of relief went through the room, followed by anxious questions about specific men. The deputy raised his hands. "3 of our men wounded, none seriously. No fatalities on our side." His eyes found Mary. "Mr. Harmon is fine, Miss Callahan. He's with the sheriff." Mary felt her knees weaken with relief. She hurried outside, scanning the group of tired, dusty men for Elijah. She spotted him dismounting near the sheriff's office. Even from a distance, she could see that his shirt was torn and bloodied, but he moved with his usual fluid grace, showing no sign of serious injury. "Elijah," she called, lifting her skirts to run toward him. He turned at the sound of her voice, his weary face lighting up. In a few long strides, he met her halfway, sweeping her into his arms. "You're hurt," Mary said, noticing a gash on his forehead and what appeared to be a bullet graze on his upper arm. "Just scratches," Elijah assured her, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. "It's over, Mary. Blackwell is dead. You're safe now." Mary's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Tell me what happened." Elijah kept his arm around her as they walked toward the sheriff's office. "We found their camp just where the deputy said they'd be. Tried to take them by surprise, but one of their men was on watch. There was a firefight." His voice grew grim. "Blackwell tried to use the confusion to escape. I went after him." Mary's grip on his arm tightened. "Alone?" Elijah nodded. "We fought. He was not entirely sane, I think. Kept raving about you being his property, how no one would take you from him." His jaw clenched at the memory. "When he realized he couldn't win, he tried to shoot me. Sheriff Miller shot him first." They had reached the sheriff's office, where Miller was supervising the unloading of a body from the back of a wagon. Blackwell, wrapped in a blanket. "It's really him?" Mary asked, needing to be certain. Sheriff Miller nodded. "It's him, Miss Callahan. I knew him by sight from wanted posters, but we also found your letter on his body. He kept it with him, seems like." Mary felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, closure, and an unexpected sadness for the waste of a human life, no matter how corrupted. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said quietly. "And thank you to all the men who risked their lives tonight." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Just doing our job, madam. Though I reckon Harmon here was fighting for more than just justice." His knowing gaze moved between them. "You two should get some rest. The doc can see to those cuts, Harmon." Elijah nodded, but his attention was focused entirely on Mary. "Let's go," he said softly. "I need to be alone with you." They walked to the doctor's house, where Elijah's wounds were cleaned and bandaged. Then, despite the impropriety, they found a quiet corner of the garden behind the house where they could sit together in the early morning light. "I was so afraid," Mary admitted, nestled against Elijah's side. Afraid you wouldn't come back. Nothing could have kept me from returning to you, Elijah said, pressing a kiss to her temple. I had too much to live for. Mary smiled, tilting her face up to his. We both do now. 2 weeks later, Mary stood in Mrs. Winter's room at the newly repaired hotel, smoothing the simple white dress that the town seamstress had created for her wedding day. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, decorated with the same prairie roses that Elijah had pressed for their cabin. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Winters said, adjusting the modest veil. Like a proper bride. Mary smiled nervously. I hope Elijah thinks so. That man would think you beautiful in sackcloth, Mrs. Winters assured her with a chuckle. He can't take his eyes off you, no matter what you're wearing. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Sheriff Miller, who had agreed to walk Mary down the aisle in the absence of her father. It's time, Miss Callahan, he said, offering his arm. Your groom is waiting, and I don't think the Reverend has ever seen a more nervous man in his church. Mary laughed, her own nervousness fading at the thought of Elijah waiting for her, probably tugging at the collar of the new shirt he'd purchased for the occasion. The small church was filled with townspeople, new friends who had embraced Mary as one of their own in the short time she had been in Pine Ridge. As the simple organ music began, and she walked down the aisle on Sheriff Miller's arm, Mary had eyes only for Elijah. He stood tall and handsome at the altar, his blue eyes widening as he saw her in her bridal finery. The love in his gaze was so palpable that Mary felt it like a physical warmth enveloping her. The ceremony was brief and traditional. They exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Elijah's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration afterward was held at the hotel, where Mrs. Winters had outdone herself preparing a feast for the entire town. There was music and dancing, laughter, and well wishes from everyone who had come to know their story. As evening fell, Elijah led Mary outside to where a wagon waited, decorated with flowers and ribbons by the town's children. Ready to go home, Mrs. Harmon? He asked, his voice caressing her new name. Mary smiled up at him, her heart full of joy and anticipation. More than ready. The ride to the ranch was peaceful, the early autumn evening cool and clear. They spoke of their future children they hoped to have, improvements to the ranch, winters and summers they would share. When they arrived, Elijah surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold of their cabin. Welcome home, he said softly, setting her gently on her feet inside. Mary looked around at what was now truly their home. In the 2 weeks since Blackwell's death, they had made more improvements: curtains she had sewn herself, rugs to warm the wooden floors, small touches that made the cabin both masculine and feminine, a true reflection of them both. It's perfect, she said, turning to her husband. Everything is perfect. Elijah drew her into his arms, his blue eyes tender. Do you remember the first time I brought you here? You were half conscious with fever, stubborn as a mule, insisting you didn't need help. Mary laughed softly. And you said, you can walk or ride, but I'm taking you home. Little did I know, Elijah murmured, brushing a curl from her face, that I was bringing home the woman who would heal my heart and become my wife. Little did I know, Mary replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, that in running from death, I would find life and love. Elijah's arms tightened around her, his kiss deepening with a passion they had restrained until this moment. As husband and wife, they were finally free to express the full measure of their love for each other. Later, as they lay in each other's arms in the soft darkness of their cabin, Mary reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place, this man, this life. From the terror of Boston to the desperate flight across the country, from the pain of her injury to the healing of Elijah's gentle care, from the threat of Blackwell to the safety of her husband's embrace, every step, however difficult, had led her home. "What are you thinking?" Elijah asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Mary smiled, pressing a kiss to his chest, above his heart. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones. If I hadn't been running for my life, I would never have found you. And if I hadn't lost Catherine, I might never have recognized the gift I was being given when I found you limping across the prairie," Elijah added thoughtfully. "Life is strange that way." "Beautifully strange," Mary agreed, nestling closer to him. "And our life together is just beginning." Elijah's arms tightened around her. "The first day of forever," he murmured. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's embrace, Mary knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had found her at her lowest moment and carried her to safety, to healing, to love. Outside their cabin, the vast Wyoming skies sparkled with stars, silent witnesses to the beginning of a love story that had emerged from danger and desperation to blossom into something beautiful and enduring. A love that would weather the seasons of their lives together, growing stronger with each passing year. A love that had begun with a simple choice to walk or to ride, and had become a journey neither of them would ever regret.